morning on the Christchurch leg of our industrial hemp tour. We've been on the road now for part of June, and we're finishing off the South Island over the next week and a half. So it's quite exciting.
Good luck.
Thank you. And it's a lovely venue. Here we are in the loft in Christchurch. So the format for today, we're going to go through a number of speakers. We're just going to change the order slightly because Joe was unable to attend because of COVID, and Melissa's just recovering from a surgery. So we are going to move things around a little bit, but we will get through all those speakers, and then if we have time, we'll unpack some of the topics a little bit further in a Q&A session or a panel discussion at the end. So that's roughly the timetable that we're going to be following, and I'd just like to acknowledge our speakers for coming along this evening on a Wednesday night in Christchurch, and to all the attendees online and you guys in person as well. Thank you very much for being here and hearing the story. I think it's often important to sort of talk a little bit about the history of industrial hemp. And so I'm just going to start by doing a little presentation in that space. We'll get onto the speakers, and then I'll come back and start talking about the why. Back in 1997 was when the New Zealand Hemp Industries Association as a non-profit organisation was formed by Matt McIntosh in the Catlins Valley. At the time, there was a moratorium on considering anything to do with hemp, so you couldn't even discuss it with the government. They just, cannabis, no, not interested. So we had to raise their awareness. So we produced a 5-minute guide and sent it to all the MPs, and along with other participants in the industry, we really lobbied hard to get them to understand that we're low THC industrial hemp, and we have a role to play in that arable industry and horticultural industry. If we leap forward to 2021, with AgMart funding, we were able to do an investor report written by Dr. Nick Marsh. Now, this just speaks to, there's still elements of the industry, the cottage industry, but it just really moves us forward into this 21st century and speaks to the opportunities that are going to create that billion-dollar industry. And we'll get to the billion-dollar number because it's a fantastically large number, and it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of skills and resources to get to that stage. But there is people have got the interest to do such a thing. But we've, come a long way there, and we're very grateful to have that report that was also sent out to the MPs. So we need to build upon that and make it an election issue next year, quite possibly. What we're looking at is cannabis. Of course, we're the low THC, less than 0.35% THC. You guys will probably be quite familiar with the three sort of species that people talk about. Clearly, a long, tall one for the fibre, shorter, more bushy for the leaf for the seed and the leaf in the health industry, possibly. But I just wanted to acknowledge that this is the fibre in a cross section, and when we remove that long bass fibre from the outside, we're left with this inner woody pith that we call hurd. And we're fortunate tonight because that process is called decortication, and we're going to hear from people involved in that decortication step, which is something very, very new to the New Zealand industry. And of course, acknowledging the seed as the other staple of the industry as well. And it's companies like Midlands that have been around since we were doing the trials back in the 2000s when they finally lifted that moratorium. So we've got the food industry, seed, the fibre industry, and when we talk about the health and wellness sort of industry, then you're looking more at the cannabinoids, flavonoids and terpenes in the female parts of the flowering tops and the leaf. So again, a bit of history, 50 odd tonnes of hemp on board when they had the sailing ships going around, a key in commerce because that was how they powered themselves. So it's a massive amount of economic opportunity there. You're looking at the ropes and cordage, but it's not just that. It's the uniforms they wore. It's the paper they wrote on. It's the corking. It's the oils they used in their lighting systems and things. It all was using seed and natural fibre, predominantly hemp. And, going back, again, over 100 years, we've got companies like we can see in the slide, Ella Lilly, Park Davis. These are massive pharmaceutical companies that were using cannabis tinctures and preparations back in the late 1900s and late 1800s and early 1900s. So again, it's not new that cannabis has been used in this way. Hemp for fibre and cordage, and these are the preparations that they were using. These were, of the pharmacopoeia in America, the top 4 out of the top 10 were based on cannabis. So it's something that people were quite aware of at the time. And again, it was like a really interesting period, this early 19th century, when you had people like George Washington Carver, who was introducing this whole study of commergy, which is using agricultural byproducts and waste to make raw ingredients for industry. So again, it's not new that we've been using this as a raw material or an industry feedstock. And of course, you may be aware of Henry Ford on the right, who that's his plastic car. There's a version online, a 1941 version. That's him tapping it with a sledgehammer and it's just bouncing back. So they were making composite cars. Admittedly, he was a soya farmer as well, so there might have been hemp and soya plants, but it just speaks to that use of agricultural byproduct or agricultural waste to make plastics at the day. And, you know, Henry Ford was famous for saying, whatever you can make from hydrocarbons, you can make from carbohydrates. So people knew about it at the beginning of the 19th century. In 1938, the $1 billion crop, that's a shot of an article in the Popular Mechanics magazine, which, you know, is still going today, so it's very popular. And it's talking about a $1 billion industry. Now, why are they able to say this is the potential for a $1 billion industry? Well, it was because a German guy called G.W. Shitland had worked out how to mechanically do that decortication step. So he in 1917 had made and patented a decorticator. He was busy promoting it all the way up until it reached the Popular Mechanics magazine in 1938. And, you know, this is the famous line in that article that says 25,000 potential uses for industrial hemp, everything from dynamite to cellophane. So that's, again, a picture of how broad this industry can be. And, of course, the United States Bulletin 404, United States Department of Agriculture, that's where the 4 times as much pulp comes from, that quote that people often use. That was out of that publication. In 1935, which actually was in 1942 and reprinted in 54, that's explaining how to grow hemp under the new regime, which we'll discuss in a moment. So, you know, people were still promoting hemp for quite some time, but unfortunately, in 1938, we were celebrating a $1 billion opportunity, while at the same time, unbeknownst to the hemp industry, the word marijuana was being used to capture cannabis. And from that, you then got this Marijuana Tax Act, which meant that everybody had to spend $1 to become a producer, and they had to renew that every year. And from that, it just sort of taxed the whole industry away. And eventually, the people that were leading the Prohibition era started to pick up on, because they were now out of a job, because alcohol was now becoming more legal. So they picked up on this marijuana, the demon, loco weed, and we ended up with reefer madness, which is something that you'll all be aware of. So this was a period going on from 1937, the Tax Act, and it went on for quite some time. But in 1944, we had a bit of a flip-flop because the war effort was requiring cordage, was requiring fibre for their webbing and their other rope requirements and things. So there was a newsreel called Hemp for Victory that ran before every major feature that people were going along, and every patriotic American farmer was encouraged to grow 1 hectare or 1 acre of hemp at the time for the war effort. And of course, on the right, the Germans had the same issue. They were running short on cordage and fibre as well. So they had a primer. So that's more of a newspaper version. And you'll see in the image, there's actually a male and a female plant that they use in this cartoon to explain the need for every patriotic German farmer to grow hemp for the war effort. So it came back when they needed it. And then, of course, they outlawed it again. And then we jumped forward to 1961, which was the first draft of the narcotics, the single convention on narcotics by the UN. And this is one of the mainstays that we were trying to get across to the government at the time in the late 90s, was that Article 28.2 says we're allowed in industry. There's a lot of people around the world using industrial hemp. And as it says, this convention shall not apply to the cultivation of the cannabis plant exclusively for industrial purposes, fibre and seed, or horticultural purposes. So that's our arable and horticultural industry protected, because even the UN will acknowledge that industrial hemp, again, low THC industrial hemp, not a drug crop, is useful in those 2 areas of arable farming and horticultural farming, which makes perfect sense for a country like New Zealand. Which, after we got that moratorium lifted, we went into 5 years of trials to answer the question, was there any likelihood of drug diversion? Somebody stealing a hemp plant and selling it as marijuana? There wasn't. So they delayed all their fears. And we ended up with the hemp regulations 2006. And I should acknowledge that, you know, people like Midlands were in this all that time. They were doing trials for this, as was the NZHIA and a number of other people. So it was a collective effort to really get us to this industrial hemp regulations. An important part, in my opinion, of this 33 odd pages of legislation is the objective number 3, because it's enabling the cultivation and distribution of industrial hemp under a licensing regime. So the Ministry of Health issues the licenses. We grow low THC industrial hemp, and we make it into hemp products. And as long as we're not passing off other forms of cannabis as industrial hemp, then we won't fall foul of that. That's why when we look at the food law, we're not allowed to use leaves or anything like that because it could be seen as promoting an illicit or adult use industry. Just to celebrate some of the companies involved, as I mentioned before, Midlands has been around for quite some time. Hemp Farm, similarly, really got started in the early 2000s. Carnapu in Hawke's Bay, Hemp Connect in Levin, and of course Brothers Green in here in Christchurch. So a really nice way to see the industry develop. And of course, it wouldn't be the same industry if we didn't look at some of the fibre uses. So there's that, again, those markets, that food and that fibre. And these are catchphrases. And we jump forward from Henry Ford's car to a Lotus, the Class C Mercedes. Some of these people in the automotive industry, for example, would have picked up more and used more about the hemp because they have to look at the full life cycle of the products they make. So they've got to take into account how they dispose of the product. So a product that's recyclable is nice to put into the design at the beginning. But the reason why they haven't really picked up on it is the industry, even globally, can't supply what they need on a continuity basis. So imagine if we can manage that scale, and we'll talk about that as we go through the evening. So that's just a little bit about the industry. This is a house being built in New Plymouth featuring the hempcrete system. And so I'm just going to hand over to, we're going to go straight to Jo now, who's going to share her screen and come in and do an online presentation. Fingers crossed. Okay, so we're going to try our other, should we try our other technical?
Let's give it a go.
Okay, because Melissa is unable to join us as well, but she did prepare a presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa. I hope you guys are all enjoying Webtools, the loft space. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, and I don't know if Richard shared with you, I'm recovering a little bit from knee surgery, so hopefully I'll be back on my feet pretty quick, but wanted to give you a little bit of an update from a technology perspective on hemp, and you'll see if Richard goes through my slides, just a little bit around the opportunity and what we're seeing across the rest of the sector from a compliance to value-added perspective. So I think the nutshell of it is there's a huge opportunity with hemp to be able to start to own your own story, and the what meat and dairy are facing now as a challenge around the complex supply chains that they have to get to end consumer. And if they were to own more of their own story, that is like the full story. That's not just the New Zealand made, but all the uniqueness about how hemp is produced, what the environmental impact it has, or mitigation effects. These are things that consumers care about, and if we can reflect them in data and story all the way to the end consumer, it's a really exciting prospect for the hemp industry in New Zealand specifically. And the first step on that journey is to digitize the compliance. So you guys are a step ahead of the game. You have the ability to be nimble and agile. We're working with the meat industry to do something very similar to create a digitized version of the assurances that they require to export. So if you want to, you can use the hemp app that we created in partnership with the NZHIA to make it possible so that if you're a member, you can use it for free for a while, and your submissions are super easy to submit to the Ministry of Health for all your transactions that you need to do. So if you want to get in touch, just log in. You'll be verified with the NZHIA as a member, and then you're on your way. We have a Facebook group as well that you can get support if you need that. And yeah, we encourage you to anyone who's growing hemp to kind of begin the journey of, or growing anything in the primary sector, to begin the journey of owning your own story, your own data, and being able to use that to your advantage. So hope you all enjoy, and hopefully I'll see you all soon.
Great. Well, thank you for Melissa to come on and share that with us. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to be here, but I will just run through the slides that Melissa has prepared, because it's very much what the messaging, telling that story. We've got to tell it well, and there's some attributes that the New Zealand hemp industry really can help within that space. But if we adopt these procedures and policies and understandings early, we can really form that value chain and make that difference and tell that story really, really, really well. And these are mega trends that people are talking about. These are things that the consumer's interested in. So we need to celebrate those. And there's lots of opportunities, especially in the food industry, I think, because there's a real differentiation if we can prove the point around possibly grain grown in Ashburton compared to grain grown in Hawke's Bay. And then you speak to geographic indicators and they all become part of that marketing mix. So to be able to tell that story is going to be a very important part of maintaining consumer confidence as we go forward. That's a QR code for the app. The app was developed with some funding from the SFFF and in conjunction with Webtools. That's the log-on profile. We're using it to try and we'll be beta testing it this year. For anybody that's got a license out there, they should be aware that their annual return is due. So this is a great way to get that information of your, for example, seed transactions. So it's still got some work to be done, but it's a start of tracking that information, and you could possibly start using it to really tell that story by adding images of the harvest and helping to really keep up with the documentation and information on your registers. So thank you very much, Melissa and the Webtools team for having us here again and for that presentation. So I'm just going to ask now our next speaker, Craig, to come up and take us through the company presentation.
Right. Thank you, Richard, and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. Also, just quickly introduce some of our team here tonight, because if there's really technical, hard questions, I'm going to divert them to them. But obviously, Ryan's going to speak up after me. We've got Travis over in the back here. We've also got Nick Pike, who consults into Carrfields in our research area. So they're also here to take any questions and be part of the presentation. But when Richard asked me to speak, I thought, well, what am I going to, what can I talk about? I can talk about what we're doing here in hemp, but very much like the Midlands story, I thought it'd be quite good to take you through how we actually got to where we got to, because it's many years, lots of different experiences that when we got involved with hemp 3 or 4 years ago, a lot of that knowledge and that history has helped us, I suppose, speed up to where we are today. So we're a family business, and I'll talk more about that as I go through, but established by my parents, our founders, sort of 45 odd years ago. My dad started as an apprentice mechanic in Ashburton, didn't earn much money, essentially started cutting little bales of hay. So essentially our business began in the fields, Dad cutting small bales of hay, with a real desire he wanted to get farming. In the mid-80s, got a chance to buy into the family farm, and obviously, things went quite pear-shaped, interest rates went to 30%, and really for him to keep the farm was really to carry on contracting. So really our business began contracting, going out on farm, baling hay, which sort of, evolved into silage and straw for different, animal feedlots and companies like Meadow Mushrooms that we still serve today, who use it for their composting. That's where our business began. It was in the 90s, got involved in farm machinery. He was running a large contracting business. There wasn't the service sector in mid-Canterbury. So essentially the local machinery dealership went into receivership. He took it out and formed Agri Farm in 1991. And so he was a machinery sales person by winter, a contractor by summer, and my mum was running our family farm. And as sort of kids, we sort of grew up in those areas. We're getting towards the end of our high school years. And in the mid-90s, he bought a seed processing factory, where I started in the business and leaving school. And it was just interesting when Joe was talking, the seed cleaning business was where I probably cleaned the first hemp seed for Midlands that actually then went into their oil processing business that they actually set up in one of our seed storage sheds. So sort of quite a history. Also did a lot of work with Midlands back in seed processing days. And we took that business to there over a 10-year period, got involved in the animal nutrition business. And again, really rode that sort of dairy growth through Canterbury, expanded our farm machinery business also, got back into seeds through purchasing Canterbury Seed Company in the late 2000s, rolled in a couple of other seed businesses on that journey, continue to grow our contracting business by making new sort of on-farm feed innovations. And then in 2014, we as a family were looking around growth opportunities. Where could we go? How could we grow? And essentially Elders New Zealand, which is a farm supplies business, did livestock and wool. Insurance came up, we acquired that business and we integrated that into the Carr group in 2014. So prior to integrating that business, we were around 150 people. When we acquired that business, we went to sort of 450 overnight. So for us, it was a big change. It took us out of the greater Canterbury region, which we had, we knew a lot of our people, we knew a lot of our farming clients. It took us onto more that, full New Zealand-based business. And in 2015, we rebranded to Carrfields. So Carrfields is really a young brand. We continued to build out our livestock business across New Zealand and, our machinery. We got involved in water and irrigation. And it was in 2018 that we actually got sort of involved back again into hemp. So as a seed business, we weren't doing a whole lot in hemp, but we got to meet Dave Jordan, the founder of Hemp New Zealand. He had a big vision to build this machine, this combine machine, and some of you may have seen it in magazines where it sort of cut it and it took it off at the top. And so he was cutting fibre, harvesting grain. And so he commissioned us to build this front for this combine harvester, which we set about doing, and we used it in the North Island. But Dave even had a bigger vision. He had a vision for wanting to create, a fibre industry in New Zealand. And as we sort of have heard in some of the first sort of presentations tonight, we very much was a food industry. Fibre was sort of, I suppose, burnt or, wasn't actually used, wasn't taking it further, chopped up in the combine. And so Dave had said to me, he came down and had a meeting in 2018. He said, we want to build a fibre factory in Northland. And I was like, oh, that's like quite an interesting place, Dave, to want to build a fibre factory. What about infrastructure? What about, growing and harvesting and all of those sort of things? And I said, actually, and what about, a fibre facility? And so anyway, I said to Dave, well, actually, when I bought Elders New Zealand in 2014, we sort of inherited with our wool business ownership in the last sort of standing wool textile yarn carpet mill in Australasia. And so I said to Dave, why don't you come and have a look at what we've got? Because maybe we've got some things that you might need if you do want to build a fibre industry in New Zealand. And I was thinking like that was quite interesting. I didn't really know about hemp fibre. But anyway, Dave went up there. He was like, there's lots of stuff in here that we'd have to reinvest into. So anyway, the partnership between Carrfields and Hemp New Zealand began. Hemp New Zealand put their money, their hands in their pockets. They invested in New Zealand yarns back then, now New Zealand natural fibres. And then Carrfields went on about starting to build out the hemp fibre vertical integration value chain, where we started, growing and trialing and then growing and then harvesting and retting. And over those few years, we've sort of built our team together, which you'll hear more about when Ryan speaks tonight. So that sort of took us to 2020. Sort of our group today, we have a holdings group, still family owned, also in farming. So still, for us, farming is very much at the heart of who we are. Our Agri business, which I've described to you, also in properties, and we have a family charitable trust, which is focused on rural health. So we now go about New Zealand and we go to local farmer events, get farmers to come in to get a health checkup. So we've only got it underway in the last few months, but it's going really well. And, getting sort of 40, 50 farmers in a day at events that we're doing. As I said, family business, still 100% owned by the family up here. Across those sectors, we sort of have revenues around 200 million per annum. Head office sort of based in Ashburton, but a team of sort of 300 or 400 people across New Zealand, with 40 of those people based in India. And I'll talk a little bit about our vegetable seed business. You can see we're sort of based right across New Zealand, both with our livestock and seeds, farm machinery. And just a little bit about our companies, just to give you the sort of context to how they will fit it, how they're fitted into this sort of hemp value chain. Obviously, we're in farm machinery, so we retail farm machinery brands from overseas, very much around the arable and contractor space here in Greater Canterbury region. But we're very much, thinking about technology, regenerative farming, and how that sort of, flows into the future of farming in New Zealand. Our contracting business, that sort of, was the founding business, is still a business in the Carrfields group today. And that business, with its experience in harvesting, crops, baling, just was a natural fit again to what, has happened, of what we've developed through the hemp value chain. Picture down there just showcases our relationship with the Burden family here of Meta Mushrooms, sort of 40-year relationship with them and supplying a fibre to them in their composting process for mushrooms. Our irrigation business, both around pivots and underground irrigation and horticultural irrigation and technology. Our livestock business, which is sort of 140 people across New Zealand. Our grain and seed business, which was out of the founding Canterbury Seed Company. So very much involved in seed production and seed varieties, and re-exporting those seed varieties back to overseas customers. Our wind seed business, which has 40 of the team in India, is a vegetable seed breeding licensing company where we breed vegetable varieties, licensed varieties, mainly focused around carrots and beetroot, peas and radish are our core crops. And we market them in our own brand in international markets, mainly through India, subcontinent, Africa markets. Wool, our wool business, which we'll go right through and start to talk about the natural fibres business, was part of the Elders acquisition. Last year, I managed to merge the two farm entities together to create Wools of New Zealand of 2,000 sheep farmers. With that, we, as Carrfields, we left that wool partnership and we retained our global brands, which I'll talk a little bit on the next slide. And we left the Wools of New Zealand group of farmer shareholders with the logistics and procurement business. Still work with them and buying wool from them, but they're located across New Zealand and now operate, as I said, as Wools of New Zealand. With that sort of separation, we ended up taking our what we call our marketing or our branded relationship customers. So we work with some global brands like First Light, Global Merino, where we supply the merino wool from farm essentially through the supply chain to those customers. And Ryan is very much involved in that business. And we see this as, for us, quite a really unique thing of what we can do with hemp and merino going forward on the world stage, and something we'll talk about later on. And then lastly, our New Zealand Fibres factory. So Christchurch Yarns was in receivership in 2014. Our wool business took it out of receivership. It was the last standing independent carpet mill, which makes carpet yarns in Australasia, outside of, the big Cavalier Bremworth and Godfrey Hirst, who have their own mills within their business. So we make specialty carpet yarns. The business has been on quite a journey, and quite a hard journey, I must say, but one that we've really taken to, and we've worked really hard to reshape the business and focus on not being the biggest producer of yarn, but actually producing high quality yarn, making beautiful yarns that can be showcased in beautiful places. And so we really focus on high-end quality yarns, which are really focused on sort of three key areas. One is sort of very much high-end homes, so making carpet yarns that would be in people's homes, private aviation and private boats. So we supply a lot of yarn to companies who make the carpets for private jets. So if any of you have flown on Emirates and been lucky enough to fly in first class, if you look on the floor, that yarn has come from our factory here in Christchurch. Also Air Force One, Air Force Two. Not many of us would have flown on that, I'm sure, but I was recently was in Italy, and I flew out of Italy a few weeks ago, and I actually went to the Tom Ford store in Italy, which we made the yarn, which has gone into that store. So pitched down bottom hand corner. So they're our sort of, high-end carpet yarn customers, and Ryan will talk about how our fibre strategy dovetails into what these global brands are looking for going forward into the future. But with our fibre facility, we had space, we had a whole lot of equipment that actually didn't need to be replicated and that we could actually use. And so last year, 12 months ago, we installed the first sort of major decortication facility in pretty much in the Southern Hemisphere of the scale, where a bale of straw will be delivered to the factory, and out will come some products which we'll talk through. So the factory has now been running 12 months. It hasn't come without its challenges, as you can imagine. But, building on the back of Carrfields and also the Hemp New Zealand's history, we've been able to assemble this value chain and get it to where it is today through those many years of experience, but those different businesses that, when you combine them together, have enabled us to get to where we've got to very quickly. And I suppose for me, just coming back recently from sort of trip overseas, a lot of research institutes that I was in, or talking to some other large hemp companies around the world, they were quite surprised and also quite complimentary on how they felt we'd come very fast, or how fast we'd come in such a short time. But it isn't a short time when you put it over a long period of time of all of these things that have enabled us to get fibre coming out of that factory. So I'm sort of going to park there, and really what I want to do is set the scene for how do we get to where we've got to, and where we're at now. And Ryan will talk a little bit about where we're going and the journey we're on, and then we'll both sort of come back in and sort of summarise out at the end, and happy to take some questions. So, Richard, did you want questions now, or just want us to smooth in? So Ryan will come around, I'll come around here, and I can point out some of the products.
Show and tell. Cool. So for those who don't know me yet, I'm Ryan Cosgrove. I come from about 10 years in wool trading, both with commodity and branded product. Did a BSc in ecology and biodiversity, and basically put it in a cupboard and went wool trading straight away. And I joined Carrfields about 2 years ago, around the same time the hemp decorticator was being installed, to help sort of put that hemp fibre into a global wool supply chain and work with some of the brands that I'd already worked with in wool, and particularly some of the processors who were doing some pretty cool stuff overseas to, what could we replicate here? What could we contract there, and what kind of partnerships could we form? So yeah, been doing it about 2 years, and as Craig said, not without its challenges. Getting a decorticator in the middle of COVID when you can't fly engineers out, wouldn't recommend it. But our guys did pretty well, and after a few delays, it got the thing running and got everything moving in the right direction. So I'm going to talk about where we're taking the strategy now. So picking up from a vertically integrated model that Carrfields has sort of put us on, and then where do we take it as New Zealand Natural Fibres, and what's the next part of that journey? I touch on it a bit later, and Craig touched on it just before, but New Zealand Natural Fibres is a joint venture between Carrfields and Hemp New Zealand. Hemp New Zealand obviously very prevalent in the food space. And the other part of everything the hemp plant can offer is obviously fibre and shivs. So it made sense to have a joint venture that took care of the rest of the plant. So here's why we think what we do works and why it's going to work in the future, and it's just testament to how much of the chain we touch here. New Zealand historically has lost a lot of its textile manufacturing for all textiles. And New Zealand Natural Fibres, formerly New Zealand Yarn, formerly Canterbury Yarn, Canterbury Spinners, is the last commodity wool yarn processing facility in Australasia. So it is one of the last sort of bastions of textile in New Zealand. And bringing a new natural fibre into that is something that's quite unique to us. Australia's lost all of their textile processing, and I was just in Tasmania a couple of months ago, and they're sort of really clambering to find what they're going to do with their fibre, because at the moment, after the seed comes off, they're just setting the crops on fire. which is a pretty bad way for your carbon negative story to, to really literally put it up in flames. So as Craig mentioned, we have the agronomy within the seed team. We have the contracting and machinery for both the planting and the harvesting, the wool with the supply chain management overseas, and then New Zealand Natural Fibres, where we've installed the decortication. It's a really long part of the chain that we have direct ownership in, and that means all of these business units can share IP up and down without having competitive issues, which is incredibly unique and something we see as a real strength, and not really something you could replicate if you wanted to start from zero. It was a unique position we found ourselves in. So the model is to create a low carbon supply chain where everything's produced locally, stored locally, processed locally, as far as we can get it in New Zealand. And then whether we're exporting products or they're further joint ventures overseas or in further manufacturing, we control as much of the supply chain in a smaller footprint as we can. And we really capitalize on that carbon story for hemp. For those not familiar with the fun anecdotes, 1.6 times its own weight carbon negative. And we're going through a program with Toitu that's doing the science right from the planting, all the inputs, all the machinery, logistics, transport, processing. And we're going to have a scientific, independently verified carbon footprint for each of our hemp products. And I sort of don't say this too lightly, hemp suffers a little bit from its own success. It's got so many things it does, you stop believing what it does. So contracting organizations like Toitu to come in and independently verify some of these claims, we think is absolutely key to the strategy. What we can do then, you hit a capacity in a locality, and then that becomes your modular model. And then you can replicate that, whether it's in New Zealand or it's counter seasonal overseas. So where we are doing it in Canterbury and mid-Canterbury, this is the test, this is the baby to get it as right as we can. And then the aim's obviously to replicate. We do have government support, and a few of you might have seen that the NZHIA is also going for a similar program, which is cool. The government has money to support hemp. We are on a $3.2 million project total, which is co-funded 40% by MPI. Comes in 4 work streams, and those reflect the sort of part of the chain that we have ownership in. So that's the genetics, the agronomics, the product development, and then the market development. We went for 3.2, and the first question I got was, why not 10? Because we have to pay for 60% of it, unfortunately. So there's money there for hemp, and particularly from a governance and a sort of rising tide, a group benefit. It's cool to see that NZHIA is taking some leadership in pursuing some of that money that MPI's obviously got allocated. So we're just coming into the end of year 1 at the moment for that. And we've had some pretty big wins, some good Kiwi ingenuity, some number 8 wire stuff, but also some really high tech stuff, and working with both University of Canterbury and Auckland University of Technology to do some really cool stuff with biocomposites, bioresins, which is really cool. And the universities love it when you say you're going to fund a master's student. So there's definitely people out there that want to do the research, which is cool. So the next slide is probably where we'll spend a bit of time. So this is the product strategy from a sort of high level. And you'll see it comes in 3 tiers, and each tier is unlocked by a certain piece of technology, a win, a big R&D step change, and it unlocks a new complexity of products. And each, as you'll see as you move up, obviously the value of those products increases as well. So we spend a lot of time in the stage 1, and that's just part of how you've got to start the business, right? We want to be growing hemp, we want to be teaching farmers how to grow hemp. We want to be learning about the agronomics of growing hemp, which means we have to take the straw and we have to do something with it. And so the decortication, separating into fibre and herd.
We'll just pass them around as we talk to them, if you just pass it around.
Yeah.
So we got that.
So if you go in order, you'll start with the least complex, and it'll see it as it gets processed. So the straw gets taken and crushed and shredded, and what comes out of that is the herd material. and the fibre. So fibre in a completely raw, untreated form is suitable for non-wovens, geotextiles, insulations, acoustic paneling. You know, when you see like a new motorway being done and they've got all that matting down to stop the dirt running off when it's raining, well, a lot of that's made out of PETs and polyester. Some of it's made with wool. The main natural product's coir, but that's not without its dodgy supply chain and high water use. So we're proposing to these huge civil companies a natural fibre that can go into those massive roading projects. And we just won a contract for 67,000 square metres for the Manawatu Gorge, which Fulton Hogan's putting in. So that'll be a hemp wool blend geotextile. There'll be no plastic in that roading project at all. On the other side of that, so we've got a low complexity use for fibre. On the other side for the herd, hempcrete's the one you would have seen a lot of, and there's a couple of samples over there. Remarkable how light it is. Light means non-structural, so it's still monolithic building around timber frames, but again, there's a lot of partners, in carbon accounting for the building industry is becoming increasingly prevalent, and it's going to become a requirement. So there's some large construction companies that are really worrying or starting to think about the carbon footprint of their materials, and herd's only going to feature stronger and stronger in that. The next step is the chemical-free degumming, or the degumming process. So if you think, when you see the raw hemp, which will be the brown bag that comes around first, if you think of like an electrical wire, when you strip out the splitter and the insulation of that, it looks like one wire, but it's actually got lots of filaments in it. And that's exactly how the hemp fibre comes out. And when you strip away the polysaccharides from that, you end up with an incredibly fine, and the white one, touch it, that is just pure hemp. And it looks nothing like hemp, doesn't look like the bag of straw that you touch first. It's remarkable to think it's come from the same plant at all. And that's the next level of complexity, and the one we're right in the middle of at the moment. And what that unlocks is textiles that are far more well-known. Interior textiles, upholsteries, carpets for broader diameter fibre. And then when we really engineer that fibre down and we nail the genetics and nail the process, that's what allows this next to skin product, the knitwear, when you get sub 20 micron fibre. That's what unlocks blending with merino wool. So this is a Montreal top. It's 67% wool, 12% nylon, 1% elastane. And we think that nylon part of merino knitwear, which is only in there for durability and strength, is really low hanging fruit for hemp. That's hemp's biggest strength, right? 20 times stronger than merino wool. That's why nylon's in those garments. And that is a huge market to bring a natural fiber in to replace the synthetic. Not taking away from wool, it'll complement it. It's got the same properties. It's hydrophobic to liquid water. It's hydrophilic to vapor. It's antimicrobial. It's got all the same features, but it's bringing strength, and it's not taking away market share. And we think that's a massive opportunity. And then we get to the real sexy stuff up the top, and this is the really high complexity stuff. And this is what we've got the universities and the Crown Research Institutes working on. Really smart people doing really cool things. You lose the concept that it was ever a hemp plant, really. So what's going around is it was a non-woven that was paired with a resin that was saturated with a resin and then pressed and heat set. And that's a biocomposite material that's made out of almost fully natural products. And some incredibly intelligent people still working on that process, what it can go into, what kind of molds that's suitable for. Carbon filtration, energy storage, the two that we're not super in, but we're aware of. So it's cool that those things are happening, and some of the partners we're working with are the ones doing it. So we're definitely keeping in touch on those things. You want to add anything into there, Craig?
No.
So
I think the first bag that came around, just for clarity, was like 95% cleaner. That was the straw bag. So that's sort of an example of in a bale. And then the big bag was sort of 95% clean. So you would have seen quite a bit of bird in there. And the smaller bag that this gentleman's got over here is pretty much now 100% clean. So that's sort of where we are for geotextiles, and this is where we are about to become before we get to the white bag that's just going around. So yeah, so feel free to ask questions later on it, but just gives you an idea of sort of the roadmap and how we're, as Ryan said, trying to get up that value chain a little bit more.
And it can't really be understated the difficulty as you hit those levels of purity, right? Like 90% was, or 80 to 90% was where the machine was when we ordered it. And it's been a hell of a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of engineering, guesswork, trial and error to get that last 10% or even last 8% to get that to 98 where it's suitable for products like this, where mills will accept a fibre that, because there's the herds of contaminant, right? You're not going to let that into your factory if it's going to leave contaminant on your machines. So to get that fibre to a purity, yeah, it really can't be understated just how difficult that last 10% is. And that's where we're pretty much at the end of now. We're quite confident in the process we've got, and we're ready to hit this next stage. So here's just a couple of photos of products from Craig's recent European tour. There's in the middle, you've got an insulation product, which you would have seen, and my phone blows up each week with people wanting to put hemp insulation in their house. Unfortunately, we don't have it yet, but cool to see what they're doing over in Europe. That's an airlay method. Here's a couple of yarns that have been produced, and I see there's also a yarn on the table. You just give it a tug for how thin it is. It's incredibly strong, and that's what hemp's bringing to those textiles. There's kind of hard to see in the top left, but as it goes across, that's the levels of cleanliness. So geotextile, you can take some herd, it's fine, it's not going to ruin your machines. And as you further process, you know, that's capital investment for each stage that you're further refining and getting another 2%, another 2%. And so that was what Craig saw overseas, and seeing the equipment and the capital required to get those last few percent.
It was actually our fibre we sent over, and I spent a day in the lab running it through different machines to take it from that sort of 95, 96% to 100% purity. So we pretty well know now the last piece of equipment that we need. And yeah, so that was a really good breakthrough for us.
And then obviously, any of you guys who have seen hempcrete building, it's a very labor intensive process. And there's a few companies around New Zealand that are trying to look at prefab solutions to that. How can you take the 7 or 8 hands you need to run hempcrete into a monolithic mold? Can we be building, you know, the whole wall structure off site? Can we be using modular constructions, things like that? And they're the same questions that European companies and North American companies are starting to work through, or have worked through as well. So it's about what can we bring back here so we don't have to go through all the trials that they've done, and speed up our development as an industry here. And we say some companies are very open, some are very closed. So yeah, trying to see what partnerships we can form around the world to make sure we just don't waste years trying things that they know didn't work. So here's kind of a summary, I guess, of what we think we should do and a little bit of what not to do. So fundamentally, and this was basically my whole presentation in Australia, was a hemp strategy in New Zealand has to start with the farmer. And any of you guys involved in arable farming at all will have seen the price of grain and cereals because of the war in Ukraine are just going through the roof. Logistics are going through the roof. And if we want to create an industry where we can grow enough hemp to sustain a manufacturing industry here in New Zealand, the return to the grower has to exceed other spring arables that they have options to. If maize pays more, the farmer's going to choose maize. It's fun to give it a go at the start, but at the end of the day, farms are businesses. And if it doesn't start with the agronomics that make sense for the farmer, we can build the entire manufacturing, all these cool brands we want. If maize pays more, we're not going to grow hemp. So we've started with partnerships with farmers that set a price that we know is sustainable for them. And that feeds into our products. We already know our products are going to be more expensive than people expect. New Zealand's a high labor cost economy. That's fine. Because we know if the farmer's not getting paid enough, then he's just not going to grow it. And everything we do is going to be a waste of time. So I put that at the top because that is what we think the focus needs to be for a growing hemp industry in New Zealand. the money involved. It's very much not cheap. There's been millions spent on infrastructure, on R&D, on getting the expertise in, the right consulting, the partnerships overseas. And that's for a business like Carrfields that already brings so much of that to the table. To replicate would be nigh on impossible, and we're not even halfway. Like that we're at step 1.5 of that 3-step of complexity, right? So that was just to get us a ticket at the table at this bottom part of the tree. As we move up, there's only going to be more and more required. And that's why we have to build together collaboratively as we go, because it's going to take a lot and it's going to take a huge effort. It was mentioned, I think, in the Midlands presentation that in the Webtools one as well, we've got to avoid becoming a commodity or an ingredient. I think the price for hemp fibre overseas is $350 a tonne, so 35 cents a kilo. That doesn't pay the farmer. That just doesn't work. And we can't be a bulk ingredient supplier. We can't lose touch of our story, which is in the Webtools part. Story and brand are going to become a huge part. And that goes beyond just being from New Zealand. You know, we've really got to build something around it to take ourselves out of the value chain and the commodity chain. Where are we bringing other parts of the story, whether it's in, you know, multi-use products or brands that are delivering different parts of the sector, or, you know, how are we really telling that story differently and making sure we're not getting 35 cents a kilo because we've just grown this hemp because we thought it was cool. The Carrfields vertical integration I've definitely hit on. The global collaboration, you know, let's not make the mistakes they've made overseas, and then the collaboration onshore as well. There's a lot of brands, a lot of companies here doing their own really cool thing. There's a lot of IP being generated in New Zealand, and that's all very much to be respected and well and good. And people are going to want first mover advantage, us included. But there's also a lot of opportunities to collaborate, and there are some definite industry-wide things. So for the Aotearoa Hemp Coalition, for NZHIA and their SFFF, making sure that we kind of get out of our bubble when those opportunities arise is going to be absolutely paramount as well. So that's all I have.
Well done.
If we could, we'll take the questions after the last presenter. Okay, that's great. So thank you very much, Craig and Ryan, for that wonderful depiction of a journey. And it is a journey. And people ask me sometimes, you know, well, you know, they're going so far ahead in, you know, in America or Europe. And you know, the short answer is, you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And this is going to be going on for a long time. And as we have understood, you know, the requirements of capital expenditure are all going to be rate determining and helping us to scale that industry. So I'll get on to some of the other topics that you guys have picked up on or introduced, and then we'll have our Q&A. But our next speaker, Brad, if you would like to come up, please, Brad. We'll have a little catch up with the Brothers Green.
So yeah, Richard asked me to speak, and I guess, you know, the last couple of years have been a challenge for everyone, and I certainly think in our industry even more so, because, you know, had a lot of progress in 2018 and 2019, and then all of a sudden it seemed to disappear coming into it. So I've sort of I guess over the last 5 years, I'll speak a bit about what I am, but yeah, this is just I guess what we've learned from a retail food perspective, and sort of our journey into the hemp industry, and what we've sort of come away with after the last 5 years. And it's certainly you know, not been without its challenges, but also incredibly rewarding as well, just to see the progress that's been made. And I mean, certainly hats off to you guys. This is incredible to see that level of progress going on in New Zealand, because, you know, that's totally where I think we need to be going, as you can probably see. So my name is Brad from Christchurch, co-founder of a few different hemp brands. I guess when I first got into the hemp industry, I was a rural banker for ASB, looking after a whole range of clients up in North Canterbury. Saw that there was some real challenges in the commodity space we were facing. first year in, we had the worst drought we'd had in 30 years, and dairy farmers were essentially losing $1 per milk solid. And, you know, coming out of, I guess, Lincoln and all that, the perception of New Zealand agriculture was that, you know, we're a very high quality food producer, but here we were sitting around the family table talking about, you know, the very potentially short future of family farms. And I think, you know, that really comes back down to what you're saying, Ryan, about, you know, the farmer really needs to be at the forefront of what we're doing here, and we're not going to be the cheapest. And hence, you know, a huge focus for us was creating value through branding and through telling the story. So I guess going into it was pretty ignorant on the realities of business. Certainly, you know, thinking about the global potential of hemp and you know, the whole 50,000 uses and what we could dream, and then there was the real reality of actually setting up a hemp company, and specifically for what we did, which was go through that vertical integration process. So actually to really want to create you know, processing facility and seed production facility up in North Canterbury, where, you know, a number of my clients were up there, and, you know, I was talking to them until I was blue in the face about how great hemp was, but, you know, there was actually nowhere for it to be processed. There was no contracts available, you know, and it's sort of, I guess, for, you know, probably speaking to the converted, but it's incredibly frustrating to know that, you know, there is real motivation out there from our agricultural community to step into new industries and to look at what else we can do. And so, yeah, so idea was that, you know, creating a couple of or retail brands was going to give us direct access to our customer. So it meant that we actually understood who was buying the product, what value they actually saw in that product, rather than I guess caught up in the commodity cycle, which is probably what I think you know, a number of players in the industry have got caught up in. And you know, it's trying to get out of that and really create a brand that really people see value in and can connect with. So yeah, so we've tried a number of things. We've got clothing made over in China and imported. We've got a skincare range. We've got a basic functional food range company, and then we're about to launch a range of supplements. So that's who I am. And I guess this is sort of us. So based up in North Canterbury, we currently only grow for seed. We essentially selling all our bales at the moment for garden mulch, which is quite popular. We've got currently 3 retail brands out in the market. We've just recently gone through the process of, I guess, one of the challenges in the hemp industry, and for anyone who's producing hemp products, is actually the full utilisation of all the products, you know, and I think this comes, you know, right back to what we can pay the farmer. And I think, you know, one of the major issues is we've got, you know, I think a lot of the major producers here in New Zealand have probably got a pretty big oil market, but we're left with this meal, essentially this green meal that's not very palatable, you know, unless you're, you know, probably like us, where, you know, we really do love hemp. You've really got to love hemp to probably enjoy that on its own. But for the general market, it's just not a product that's going to fly with any kind of scale we haven't seen. So essentially, we've just gone through and I guess working out how can we turn that byproduct into something that holds a lot more value, and give us an opportunity to actually, you know, create some balance with that distribution, because, you know, I think, you know, for anyone who's been growing hemp over the last years, there's a hell of a lot of seeds sitting in silos around New Zealand at the moment. And, you know, we really need to be concentrating on how can we move through that seed stock, and actually but still creating value at the same time. So we've created this new golden range, which essentially means that the byproduct from the oil is about 65% protein rather than 43%. It's much more soluble, much finer without the shell and or without the shell particles in it. And it's really exciting for us. We've got a flavoured protein powder that we've created out of that, and we are really seeing some, you know, a lot of interest from, you know, I guess as an ingredient for people, particularly looking into the plant-based protein space. So still some work to do there, but we're really excited because it means for the first time, you know, over the last 6 months, it's certainly not been an easy process just to get that all right. But, you know, we can actually see that we can really balance our oil production, you know, with the sale of that that byproduct, or not a byproduct anymore, but actually putting a bit more value to that. And one thing, I think with, your retail brands, you can sort of get a bit caught up in the bricks and mortar space and love being on shelves and things like that, but we've certainly seen a significant decline in the retail bricks and mortar space in New Zealand. For example, I guess Chemist Warehouse over the last 5 years since they've been in New Zealand have now taken over 70% of the retail trade from community pharmacies. And, so you go into pharmacies and now, I go into the Chemist Warehouse around the corner, and on a Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, there's a line of 50 people at the door, and I've never seen that in a pharmacy. So we've really, and to go into those places like Chemist Warehouse and even into foodstuffs and these large distribution bricks and mortar chains cost a significant amount of money. They chip away at your margin the whole time, and to us it was really sort of a death by 1,000 cuts future if we continue down that route. So we've really had to I guess to eat a bit of humble pie and really extract ourselves out of that business model and now really focus on our e-commerce platform and really driving online sales, which is actually really starting to take shape. We, I think, across the hemp industry, we face a really challenging environment for advertising on social media. So we're sort of unable to use the words hemp and use pictures or use photos of the farms and things like that. So, it's about how can we navigate some of those challenges, and we've sort of found, I've just found a way of sort of like, focusing on what the problem that we're solving for the customer is, and it just happens to be that hemp's the ingredient. So we've really gone through and, if you can strip out as much hemp off your landing page as possible, and in the form of even creating a brand new landing page which connects back to your website, you can sort of get around a lot of those Facebook ad blocking policies. So, highly recommend to anyone to do start to try things, because there are certainly ways around it. And it's worked really well for us because, trying to grow a brand in 2022, if you're not on social media, well, it's incredibly difficult because, that's where we see, a lot of the mainstream target market that we're looking for, and not just our younger generation, but also, the older generation as well, are parking up on there at the same time. So just give you an idea, so this is our skincare range, organic hemp seed range. So we've got a body cream, a night serum, skin rescue balm, lip soother. We had a contract going into pharmacies that was just as we went into lockdown, went incredibly pear-shaped. Essentially, like all pharmacies shut down, couldn't sell anything, and big learning for us. Sort of had a 3-year contract and nothing sort of turned into fruition. So, a lot of money put into brand development and scaling that product and getting all the product together. And, now sort of really having to step back and scale that back a wee bit. But amazing product, really good feedback as well. So we're sort of just keeping it going. This is our plant, the drying facility we have up in North Canterbury. So we've got a drying facility up there with a seed processing facility as well. So we, dry it there. We get it taken away, contractors, and cleaned and dressed, and then take it back, and then we can turn it into the raw ingredients essentially for these products. This is our, our raw ingredient range, our functional range, and I think what I'll touch on, but this is allowing us to really connect to our customer. People can identify with the Brothers Green, they understand who we are, where the product comes from, and I think with what you guys are doing, I mean, we're the ones who know all this great information. We know all about it, but most people really don't. And it's how can we connect as quickly as possible with as many customers as possible, because they are really, once they know about hemp, there's a lot of people who are really fascinated by it. So, and this is our new product that we're launching, hopefully launching in November this year. So it's essentially a capsule range, so really built upon, I guess, a lot of the learnings that we've taken around why hemp seed oil in particular has been, selling really well, and the awareness is growing because it really works. And I think, we live in a world where we've got to package things up into a form that people understand and can, is easily integrated into their normal routines. And that's why going into capsules and, really looking at how can we use, other terpenes and things like that, which fall outside of the cannabinoid legislation, but still sort of casually playing in that whole space. And I think, we really need to be, I think we need to be quite challenging in how we're going to actually approach this. Like, we really need to, we all understand what the benefits of hemp are, but, we really need to be like allowing those traits and those benefits to really show. And that's where I think, these value-added products are sort of where we're focused. So one big thing that we've really taken seriously and we think is incredibly important is hemp education. And we've had to do it really grassroots, I guess, with specifically not being able to advertise on social media. So we've done 2 hemp field trips, and, as a rural banker, I've never seen any interest essentially from the urban population in a crop until we managed to get 80 people up on buses up to now north of Christchurch to come to a hemp field trip. And, I think, it's, as much as it can be a little bit challenging at times to do that, I think it's so important because, we're really dealing with a pretty uneducated population. And as I'll touch on later, this was a group of Grey Power members who we managed to convince to come up to our cannabis farm. And, it was just incredible to see, this group of people who have probably grown up, in their early era where natural fibres was just the norm, and natural products were the norm, and they had hemp rope and things like that. And so they all grabbed a hemp plant and took it home, and they were talking about they're going to flick it all around the retirement home and make sure everyone knew about it and have good sleeps and all the rest of it. And again, like coming back to the rewarding part, we're giving these people, an option with a natural product that really actually works for a lot of conditions that they're facing, particularly around joints and inflammation. And, to hear some of the feedback, like we've just been out of oil for 2 weeks just from a bottling plant with through COVID and things like that. And, we're having these old people ring up and just like, where is my hemp oil? I need my hemp oil. I can't live without it. And, these big, tradies and truck drivers and stuff with arthritic hands all coming in and being like, this is the only product that works, and just drinking the stuff. And I think that's really cool. And it's, it's great that we've got the store and we've got a great product, but it's actually, right, what's the next step in actually making this mainstream? So I guess this is just, and I think without being too cynical, this is sort of what we see some of the real challenges that the industry faces at the moment. I think, the big companies, because of where we've come from, we've still got this very much really reliant on ingredients or whole food raw products. And I think, that's, really creating, we're hearing some, really difficult things going on where people are selling seed for far less than it's been grown for and losing money and things like that. And it's just really hard, and farmers getting in contact saying they're not getting paid and wanting to offload seed. And, that's not a good thing for the industry, and it's not going to allow some sustainability built into the system. And I think within that, I think we really need to focus on how do we generate more retail brands with high value-added products, or at least some value-added to them around branding, because us relying on our wholesale customers to do the hemp marketing for us just isn't working. We're expecting, if it's sanitarium or it's could be Synlay or calcium, whoever's using these products, we're relying on them to do the marketing, and that's not working, and it's not going to come from them. It really, I think, has to come from the industry itself, who really understand the benefits of the product and how it can be applied. Regulation legislation is really, really challenging. I would hate to think of how much product that has been grown on farms in New Zealand has been wasted in the last, 20 years, 16 years. It would just be a colossal amount of product that we could have used. And I think, I think what we saw this real gold rush that came in 2018 around the change in legislation around food. But since then, we really haven't seen any other progress. And I think I can only speak for my own company, but we certainly thought that we were going to continue to see progress in the space and continue to see other markets opening up for those byproducts. And we haven't, and it is really challenging. I know there's been a number of companies who have either pulled out of using hemp products or scaled right back. And that's just, we need to keep that momentum going somehow, in regards to not only keeping the businesses that are established going, but also attracting other businesses into the market. So, regulation legislation really needs to change. I think, we seem to have, some of the conversation I have within the hemp industry, I think we really see, there's this real sort of like narrow-minded view that it's just the New Zealand hemp market, and we can be quite, I've heard of a company going around buying off other companies' products off the shelf and then giving their first order for free and just dumping that product in. And that's just, I don't think that's within the realms of what the hemp industry should represent. I really think we need to get out of that mindset. And as you guys say, like, collaboration is the way forward for all of us, because, we're all doing great work in some capacity. But I think, opening up that conversation for the hemp companies to have some kind of connection or collaboration, and get out of that whole, really small playing in New Zealand space, I think will be really good. And then this is what we've found out, is really no one knows we exist. Like, they don't know much about hemp. They don't know much about the New Zealand hemp industry. I'm so surprised, it's 2022 and I live in this hemp bubble and we all love it. And it's the most incredible thing we've ever found. And then I'm going down and speaking to 150 people in Timaru, and barely any of them know that there's even much hemp being grown in New Zealand, or there's even a hemp industry here, and it's like, that needs to change. Like, I should be going there and just being flooded with information and knowledge and talking about what's going on and all the rest of it, rather than going there and 150 people and 3 or 4 of them really understand what hemp's about and all the rest of it. So I think, getting out from under that invisibility cloak and really making some noise somehow, I think is going to be super important. So this is, I guess, what our perception is as of today. So I guess first one around regulation and legislation is, how do we improve the political stance, or how do we improve our political power to shift something forward? And I really think the number one thing is education. I really think that building a really solid foundation of public awareness is going to go a long way, and driving the awareness that hemp is actually a thing, and that there's people out there who really want to grow it and use it, because, as I said, there's a lot of people out there who just don't know what's going on and don't know we exist. If you guys would go out there and be able to publicise what you're doing, it would blow people's minds. People wouldn't even be able to comprehend that that's going on in New Zealand. I think just playing on within the system, like, how do we find a champion in government, or someone who can really push this forward? And I really think it's, allowing them to understand that there is a real political, there's a political game to be played, and that, aligning with the hemp industry and pushing hemp progress, would be beneficial from a political perspective. And again, like, I think we're in this perfect storm of the environmental challenges, the health challenges, and I guess there's just a general feeling that we need to do something drastic, and we need to change into something that's a lot more generative and leave something for our next generation. So I really do think that at the moment the environment is right to really create some noise about what we're doing in the industry. What we've learnt, I guess, from our perspective, is when we first started with our hemp brands, we thought that because it was hemp, people would buy it. That's not why people buy our products. They don't care that it's hemp. They care about the product because it works for them. And I really think, how we talk to people about hemp and everything, I really think it's about applying it to the specific problems that they face day to day. So I guess, how can we, talk about hemp and all its benefits, but then how do we actually apply that to something that people can really grasp and hold on to in a challenge they're facing each day? As I said, we come across this thing where you can do 50,000 uses, and that just loses people. I think, within the products that we can do here in New Zealand at the moment, what you guys are doing in the fibre space and what the existing industry's done around the hemp seed products, there's there is really enough there that we can talk about that can differentiate us well apart from any other crop and a lot of other products. So I think, being a bit more focused and specific about what the hemp plant can do, I think would go a long way. It's certainly gone a long way for us. And again, how many people out there need to know about hemp before we see, some real momentum in the public space. And then I guess, as we've heard, everyone's doing their own little bit of research, everyone's working with institutions, and it seems to be everyone's operating in like quite a siloed space. And I really think that, there's things obviously that are commercially sensitive or that are specific to the products that each company's doing, but I also think there's a general hemp awareness that I think by introducing into the mainstream public that will help shift that. And that can be both I reckon, highlighting the legislation and the ridiculousness of it is one way, because, we had where this old garden club come in and they all wanted to start petitions and march on their local councillor and demand them to change it, because they just thought, once you tell them how ridiculous it is, they just can't believe that it's actually, it's really a thing. So I think there are some things that within the industry that we can collectively agree on that we want the public to know without sort of stepping too closely on each other's toes. And again, this is really what the big change for us has been, is, our customers are our customers because, again, we solve a problem. When we first started, we thought because it was hemp that would sell, and that just did not turn out to be true. So, we've really shifted to actually how do we put our products into and market those products into a form which they understand how to use and understand what impact it's going to have on them. And I think in that health space, particularly the environment we live in at the moment, that's really important. And again, often, have people come up and talk about, how they want to get in, and a lot of them talk about, I want to grow and grow. And I'm like, look, get a product together and start a retail brand first before you worry. We've got enough growers and we've got enough seed around to that's not the issue. The issue, I believe, is, we need to get as many value-added products or value-added businesses out there who can touch the customer directly and really drive that education piece. And I do think that those customers will do the best job of those products and doing the product justice. Getting the science, I think, we hear this noise about how hemp can sequester 4 times more carbon than a pine forest and remediate soils and things like that. But it's really sort of like flaky and doesn't really rest with science. And is it relevant to New Zealand or is it relevant to overseas? And we've even done the calculations, and it just definitely doesn't sequester 4 times more carbon than a pine forest. So I think we need to be real about what we're talking about and have a sort of, I guess, connect with or not allow ourselves to be not taken seriously because we're making all these claims but without really the evidence and the science to back it up, because it's just frustrating. You hear people and all of a sudden it just gives people an excuse to come back and say, well, that's bullshit. What else is bullshit about what you're saying? So health, I think, is massive. I think if we can get as much into the health space as possible with a range of products, not only because people are willing to pay more for supplements and things like that, but also because the product really works. We're really seeing tangible results of people that brings people back as a customer. And I think in today's world that can often be a surprise because people seem to just fly through different products and supplements without them actually doing anything. And here we've got people that for the first time who have actually been really skeptical. Like my grandma, she was taking her 4 years to convince her to take hemp seed oil. She's 86. Couldn't really go for longer than an hour with a garden club for walks. Finally got her to taking a teaspoon a day, and now she's going 2 or 3 hours again. And that's just taking a natural product. And that's so common, like it's everywhere. And I think, we could do a really, we could get into that market a lot more, I think, with some really high quality products. Another one is, I think this is an evolution, not a revolution. We're not going to tear the system down and start a new one. We need to present ourselves as in collaboration and in support of the existing industries, because, creating enemies is not going to get us very far. you know, and in collaboration with the different products and how hemp can fit in with, you know, different farming systems and different cropping rotations and how it can manage nutrient limits and all those things. I think that's how we're going to get real traction within the farming sector. You know, and it's not calling, you know, ridiculous stats about red meat out and all that kind of crap. It's actually being like, look, we are here to be with the New Zealand agricultural sector, not to try and tear it down. One thing that we've sort of heard and it's resonated quite well is we talk about you know, what New Zealand does really well when we produce protein in the form of milk and white protein and red and meat. And I think, you know, we start to have this discussion around green protein and, you know, and how does that fit in with our current New Zealand protein offering? Because at the moment, we don't really have much for plant protein industry in New Zealand. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. And I think, you know, thinking about this perspective and you know, how can we integrate into the existing protein system and you know, build on that New Zealand story that's been created in it by our protein industries, I think could go a really long way. And you know, that's sort of where we really think there's some big opportunity. And yeah, I think sometimes we can get caught up in a lot of the really high use functions of hemp, and I think those things will happen. But I think, you know, the reality is we've got limitations around processing capacity and all the rest of it. And I think it's, you know, what can we do now today, you know, to solve the challenges with what's available to us now. And I really think that, you know, highlighting the benefits of hemp just simply as another feed option or, you know, as a crop to help mitigate nutrient runoff and things like that could be, you know, is a really good way just to like, get the new farmers on board because that's what they're looking for, but not get too ahead of ourselves and promise things that we either can't deliver on or aren't going to happen. And then, you know, we end up in the space where it's sort of like, when do you stop believing what we're going to say and what we can do and all the rest of it? And yeah, so I guess we've sort of come up with a couple of things that we think, I guess just would be some low-hanging fruits that don't require sort of like government control or external things to that could potentially restrict them. And, you know, so first of all, I really think we want to give our the New Zealand growers and the New Zealand hemp industry some kind of identification so that we can differentiate ourselves from imported product, but then also start to build on that New Zealand hemp brand with research and science and things like that, so that, you know, when we do go to the international market, we can actually, you know, capture that premium price because of, you know, the conditions that we grow here in New Zealand. So I think something like that would be really, really powerful. You know, I think there's a little bit of New Zealand washing going on, not just in hemp, but across a whole range of products. And I think if we can stamp that out as quick as possible, nothing wrong with any imported products, but you know, they should not be able to compete with us, you know, from a public perception perspective with, you know, from the quality and the type of product that we're producing. I think, you know, some kind of collective industry agreement around all right, well, what is a amount of information that we would be happy as an industry for the public to know that's not going to affect us commercially or, you know, give anyone a leg in the door more than anyone else. So, and I don't think that would be hard. I mean, it's not a big industry. And I do think, you know, most people are in this industry for you know, a much higher purpose than just making a heck of a lot of money. You know, they do want to see this industry flourish just for the benefits that it can provide. And I think it would be really easy to come up with, you know, some kind of aligned campaign around things that we collectively agree on. Would be great if, say, 4 million Kiwis or 2 million Kiwis all knew about the hemp industry, and you know, that can, you know, feed in to what we see as I think there is a way we can, you know, really gain some large political support and large public awareness support. I think that, you know, agreeing on you know, what kind of products we want to talk about in the market, the benefits of the plant, but also the awareness of legislation, because, you know, it's crazy when you tell people about this, just how, you know, the lack of logic within that that people recognise. and just the challenge that it creates within the industry, and what it's doing to the businesses. So, and then just going on a 12-month campaign, we want to reach 1 million, 2 million New Zealanders, through video, articles, Facebook, radio, or whatever, and see how that goes, because I think we really could shift the dial. So thank you all very much for the time, and thank you very much to Richard for organising this tour. It's what needs to happen, and it'd be great one day, and we can come in here and we're in the convention centre instead with a couple of thousand people. So that's sort of, I think, what we all want. But yeah, there's certainly some work we could be doing in the meantime. So thank you very much.
Definitely some thought-provoking things from Brad. Thank you very much for sharing those, Brad, because I think there's a lot to be said around that collaboration, which we've heard as a theme throughout the presenters tonight. So the next few slides, folks, are just about why hemp from an NZHIA point of view. And it's great that the speakers have stimulated quite a lot of conversation, because some of the topics being touched on today really are so relevant to our industry. That we do have a branding image, and changing that narrative is going to be incredibly important. And we'll talk about some of the inherent qualities of the crop as we go along, but it's really the opportunities. And the reason why we're doing this tour is to try and identify the end users and try and get those industries involved in this discussion, so we can understand what they need, what sort of products they want. In the sense of fibre, for example, it's important that an architect or a builder gives you their specification, so you can work out through the value chain where you want to fill in that gap. And there will be people that want to fill those gaps, the investors and things like that. And I hope that the operation of the decorticator gets replicated all over the country, and there's lots of investment opportunities for those people to get involved. So there's many ways to get involved in that industry. I'm just going to go back for one moment to the AgMart funded investor report that we produced in 2021. It's been great to have AgMart as a really supportive of the industry. It's one of those emerging industries, so it sits quite well in their remit. But I just want to acknowledge that the MPI had also done a facilitating industry document that was released in June 2021. And in their scenarios, they looked at something that might be 11 million up to 774 million by 2030. They gave up, they sort of narrowed it down to scenario 2 being a $30 million crop. But as I said, if we can really get this scenario 2 for the Hemp Industries Association and really get this fibre industry scaling up and the food industry really working on export, because there's great reasons why New Zealand's story for oil is something that people are interested in, then we have a real potential to really move the needle on this. And I think that will lead in many ways to the politicians being a lot more comfortable about the potential, because when they realise that there's political capital to gain rather than to lose, that's when they'll start influencing their bureaucrats to move forward. And this is the value chain. So this is where we're looking at all the gaps, and there's loads of gaps all the way through this value chain, as we've heard from many of the speakers today, how hard it is and the things that you need to do to move it forward. But if we don't match that supply and demand, then you're going to end up burning the farmer or burning the end user. So it's very important that we try and work together in a collaborative way. We don't have time to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of resilient supply chain issues and all sorts of things. Witness Jib. I mean, it won't be too long before a building manufacturer company decides, okay, well, let's start looking at hemp and starts investing in that. And then hopefully we have a few years to get the farmers on board and the processing and all those value-added steps that are required. And it's not going to happen overnight, as we've heard today, and it's going to require a big effort. But it's going to be well worth it. When we look back in 10 years' time, regulatory hurdles aside and things like that, it'll be what was all the fuss about. And then we've got this massive industry working well in the primary production. And that's important for us as well, because we're looking at complementing other primary producers. The wool was mentioned today, forestry, because with hempcrete you would still need a structural material to hold up the roof, so there's your wood use. Clearly when we can free up that farming rotation with dairy farms and using hemp in that animal space, then there's clearly some understanding about those rotation crops. But we do need to know more about New Zealand specific effects of growing hemp. What's the follow-on crop effect? How does it? We heard about phytoremediation and using it to lift heavy metals. Yeah, great, rah, rah, rah claim, but we've got to take those rose-tinted glasses off and be realistic about what we can achieve. And a lot of that is based on science. So we need that science to be done. And it does speak to that pre-competitive sort of science, that foundational knowledge that we're all going to benefit from. And of course, the bonus of that is that if industry funds some of that, the people doing this work are building up their skills, building up their cumulative knowledge within the CRIs and universities. And to be honest, when I've done this tour, which is sort of with the CRIs, universities, and these town hall type meetings for these end users, the industry, the amount of engagement's been massive. All the CRIs involved in this. And I mean, it's one of those very few instances where they're all joined up and there's a cross cannabis sort of group talking to each other, which is great. And the universities in the same space. But even talking to economic development agency people in the regions, they've all been very engaged as well. So there's an appetite for that. There's an understanding that we need these sort of products to help move us forward. And if we can be a catalyst for that, then that's got to be a great thing. And if we can understand what it means to fit it in rotation by that, that's got to be the ultimate, in the sense that, our whole industry is underpinned by the farmers. If we don't respect what the farmers are doing, as we've heard, the business plans need to include the farmers. If they don't come on this journey, then we don't have an industry, and we won't get anywhere near, the realisation of the inherent qualities of this product, which we'll get to next. Because from the NZHIA's point of view, farming, that's the foundation, but we do have the food, fibre and health industry. So talking about I'll just go back to the farming as well. For those that aren't aware, you do need to have a licence under the Misuse of Health Industrial Hemp Regulations 2006. That's a grower's licence, which is a general licence. And there's two types, a grower and a processor. The processor lasts 3 years and a grower lasts 1 year, but you can extend that over another 2 years. So you can get 3 years out of both licenses. And then if you wanted to do research and breeding, you would have to have a research and breeding license. But it's important that you do understand that there is a license required, and then there's some responsibility with that. But it's not hugely complex or overly compliant to deal with. Our regulations, for the effect of just issuing license, it really fits the purpose. It's just that interpretation hasn't been really, in our opinion, upheld. So that's just a little bit about the licenses you would need to grow. Now, if you're going to go into the food industry, because seed is a Class C drug, the whole seed, you will need a license as a processor. So that's that other step that I was talking to about those general licenses, but now you're a processor, you're not cultivating. And, the things about the seed, if you're harvesting for seed, it comes off with a high moisture content. So you've got to get that dry really fast. You can't, when we were doing the trials, people would go in, have a cup of tea, come back and their bins are just steaming. And that's because they created compost. Now, if you have bitter seed, you're going to have a bitter product. So you've got to really nail this down. You've got to be amazingly onto it to get that moisture out really, really fast. And again, if you're in the seed industry and making a food product out of that seed, the enemies are heat, light and air. So if you're manufacturing an oil product and you're letting in air, heat or light, it's affecting the quality of your product. And we need to really have that best practice, because then we're really producing fine food grade products, which will have a worldwide global niche market. And there's some amazing properties of the hemp, as Brad was telling us, these essential fatty acids or amino acids, it's a perfect balance of omega-6 and 3 for the human body. So it's like we're really quite aligned to this product. And those inherent qualities really make this an outstanding raw material for industry. In this case, it could be an ingredient for the food industry. We should acknowledge that there is an application. The previous application that allowed us hemp seed foods in 2018, that was first put in front of Food Safety Australia and New Zealand in 1998. So it's not going to take 20 years for the next application to go through, and it has been submitted last year, but we don't know when they'll pick it up and start reviewing it and doing public consultation. But that application is all about using the leaf and the flower, the roots and the sprouts of the seed to produce foods. So that could open up another massive market, the same as what we saw when we were allowed to use hemp seed for human consumption. So that's a little bit of a news from the industry side. We've still got that issue with animal use, but we need some science again to help move that forward. Okay, so the fibre industry. Now, if you were industry people and there was somebody in there in the audience that was making a medical device, and I said to them, look, the fibre itself is going to be naturally antifungal, antibacterial, antimicrobial, antistatic, stops umpteen % of the UV light. Wouldn't you want that in your filter in your medical device? Or wouldn't you want that in your bedding in your hospital and all these sort of things. And that's when the light bulb moment goes off. And they're the people that are going to help us create the demand. And then from that, we can scale the industry and help those farmers to get the supply happening. So there's a massive amount of opportunities in that space, but really the rate determining step was a decorticator. So 2018, hemp seed food comes along. 2021, we've now got a decorticator in the country, which is a massive cause of celebration, because it's now allowing people to tangibly touch some of these products. And when they touch them, it becomes real. And that helps with our branding and our marketing message that we can all collaborate on. And of course, the complement to the other primary sectors, particularly forestry and wool in this case. Now, looking at the health industry, it's something that most people would say, oh, too hard, because the medicinal cannabis scheme has its own set of framework, which is great if you're on that medicinal end of the spectrum. So what I mean by that is if we start with food and then you move through functional food and dietary supplements, then you're into sort of natural health products and nutraceuticals, and that's a massive health and wellness space. As Brad was telling us, these people are really interested in products that work. This is a raw ingredient that works in most products. So why wouldn't there be a demand for that? Now, as long as you're not making medical claims, you don't have to comply with the medical regulations, which is a completely different set of compliance and legislation that the medical companies have to do. But there's a huge market in there. Now, of course, THC, controlled drugs, CBD, prescription medicine, it's a problem for us. But as Brad was saying, we've got terpenes, flavonoids, and other cannabinoids, these minor cannabinoids, and there's 100 plus of them. Let's start doing investigation into those. Where are those markets going to go? What can we do in that space? And then we look at the byproducts and the waste, not waste streams, we're talking about byproducts now. And this is speaking to full plant utilisation, because if we can get that revenue stream from all parts of the plant, then the economics are going to help stack up. And we've been very fortunate that the Bioprocessing Alliance has funded Callaghan to work with the CRIs and the industries as well, had some input on the document. They've just released a white paper last week on the utilisation of these waste streams. And we had, Peter was involved from Agri research, so there's a lot of work done in fibre, roots, leaves, and seed. Now, we've heard about some of the byproducts that aren't being used in this space. We've got to get way smarter. We've got to use all these things. Burning it isn't quite the answer, as you say. I mean, we're trying to go CO2 sequestration, and then we burn it. It doesn't quite stack up. But again, what are these markets that we can look into? And I think that's where the industry needs to come in and start partnering with the hemp industry, because we're not going to reinvent the wheel. The construction industry already exists. The food industry already exists. Sure, there'll be some opportunities for hemp companies to vertically integrate in those spaces, but most of the time, those people need, they're all looking for this new brilliant story they can tell. So they need something in their marketing mix. They want to support sustainability. And we're coming along with this great raw material or ingredient that has these inherent qualities that make it outstanding for them to use. We just need to tell our story better and to more people, and really get those people across the line. Because once those people touch those products, like I've got two looks. For the university ones, I wear a suit because I think that's trying to do the business thing. But for you guys, I'm wearing hemp. So it's a hemp shirt, hemp shoes, hemp jeans, hemp socks. I wish I wore my merino possum hemp wool socks, But this is the sort of thing. We've got to support our industry. We've got to really, call it out and make the most of it. And those consumers want that story, and they'll support that story. But it can't just be because it's hemp. As Brad alluded to, it's not quite as simple as that. For some, maybe, but they're not the market. The mainstream market is, huge and diverse. They want a product that works. If you make a product that's fit for purpose for them, they'll buy it and they'll support you and they'll be loyal in that space. So there's some tremendous opportunities. So just getting back to that health industry, it's a very wide industry. We used to say food, fibre and medicine. But because the medicinal cannabis regulations came along, we now say food, fibre and health, because we feel health, including medicine, is a wide health and well-being. It's a massive market. We talk about mega trends and plant-based and things like that. These are all amazing areas to be working in. And there's a lot of complements with other New Zealand native botanicals. Again, huge number of an opportunity of research and development required. So that's another field for the universities and the Crown Research and the independent people to really move forward on new product development. So just to acknowledge that as a registration person and you've come along, and online people as well, you'll go into a draw for one of our hemp hampers, and it brings me to there's a spot prize. We have 2 spot prizes tonight, one from Hemp NZ and one from Pure Heart Aotearoa. So there's 2. There's posted under 2 seats. If you just reach between your legs, there'll be possibly you might feel a post-it on the plastic clothing or next to you. Somebody must have picked one up. Have we got one? 2. Okay, so that's great. So if you could just hold on to those, and I'll give you those prizes. And if you're able to, we would love to take a photo for our promotional purposes as well. So that's great. We've got I've done well. I remember to give out the spot prizes. Always a concern. The other one, for anybody joining the association during the tour or rejoining the association, they go on to win a Harkin Zander. And now this is an example of an entrepreneurial person within the New Zealand hemp industry making an outstandingly high value and high quality cosmetic product and taking on the world. Go global from day one. There's potential there for that. And so we really celebrate that. And a bit of a acknowledgement of some resources. Callaghan Innovation, I've mentioned the work that they've done on that whole plant utilisation or that full plant utilisation. So that's an amazing document. If you want a copy, let me know and we can send you it. We're included in the links in the follow-up email that you get from our Humanitech system. But they also have a series of roadmaps for fibre, for seed and for medicine. Now, those roadmaps are an evolving document, so there's always lots more things added to them, but there's some really good, useful links in there. And Te Puni Kōkiri have some amazing information on some alternate land uses involving industrial hemp, particularly for Māori land trust owners. So really good resources there. I just wanted to give a shout out to the plan for this tour as part of what we intend to do with the AgMart funding that we've received is to set up a portal, an online community. So this would be separate to the NZHIA in the sense that not everybody needs to be a member of the Hemp Association. We would love it if you were. I'll get to the next slide in a moment. But it's people need to get onto their hemp journey quickly and find out where those resources are. So what we'll do is we'll use these recordings to try and create profiles for everybody so that people joining the industry and getting started on their journey can really navigate it a lot quicker and make use of the work already being done and the collaborative approach of the industry. And that's the Aotearoa New Zealand Hemp Alliance. And so that'll be coming out after we finish this tour. Big thank you for our speakers, Carrfields, the Brothers Green, Midlands, and Webtools for hosting us. We couldn't have done it without you. And I think, having heard what you all said in different ways, there's a lot of common areas in there. And it's really exciting to see what you guys have done. And, to see that fibre industry take off and to see the seed industry move forward since 2018 has been really gratifying because it's been a bit of a bubbly old road since then. But once that health system goes, we're really flying in places. And that speaks to, political capital. Why haven't we got a champion within the industry, within the government? When we were doing the trials back in 2000, 2005, there were champions. You had Rod Donald, Annette King, Philida Bunkle. Now, these people were MPs and they were willing to say, that's a great idea. I want to see that move forward and do something about it. So we've got to find those champions again within this industry. And I think if we can get our messaging to right, if we can change that narrative a little bit and make it safe for them to support the industry, then we can really get some real traction. Because most other people around the place, as I pointed out, the Crown Research Institutes, the universities, economic development agencies regionally, they're all very much in favour of it. I just wanted to acknowledge our sponsors, which we couldn't have done this without AgMart. They've been a great supporter of the hemp industry over the years. I mentioned the investor report that they helped fund or funded last year, but they've also been, they gave us a contribution to our 2018 summit and they've helped us with our conference speakers in that time, which was great. We wouldn't have been able to bring in some of those overseas experts without that contribution. So AgMart really has done outstandingly well particularly for the New Zealand hemp industry, I've got to say. We've managed to tap into them a little bit. And I think, hopefully they'll see some of the benefits because we've spent quite a lot of this money, this budget, on advertising. So it's in stuff, it's in NZME, it's on iHeartRadio, it's popping up. And you never know who's going to see that sort of thing as well. So, but it is being seen because it's digital. So it's not like a print thing, where you don't know what's gone. At least it's been delivered. And of course, our spot prize sponsors for this evening, Pure Heart Aotearoa, and Hemp New Zealand. So obviously I've got to do a shout out, otherwise my executive would look at me strangely. It would be great to have you guys as members. We have a $25 supporting member, $50 individual, and $100 business member. So of course, we're a member funded organisation, so we can only do so much with that. And if we really want to move the industry forward, we need more members to get on board. And we are looking at some of the things that have been discussed, and we'll try and give you some updates. At the very least, you'll all be added to the public newsletter distribution. So you will be able to get some updates from the industry from time to time, every bi-monthly that is. And then members just get a little bit more information, a little bit more timely as well. But definitely more information, and we'll work on the resources page for that value chain. So that's the conclusion of the presentations. So thank you for bearing with us and showing an outstanding amount of interest in all of those topics. But now we'll just have to rejig the cameras, and we've probably got time for sort of 10 or 15 minutes with Q&A. So
What sort of the level of interest in the herd and byproduct that you guys are producing?
Yeah,
Where do you see that sort of?
there was definitely, so when we first started decortication, there was obviously word that it was coming to New Zealand. And so people who were holding off on their own builds were waiting for that. And so we had 6-8 months worth of orders, like the moment we started processing, we couldn't keep up. And maybe a little bit facetiously, we thought, wow, hemp demand in New Zealand is unlimited. You can't go wrong. But that wore out. And then we had to start looking at more commercial applications. So who are the people who are going to come back month on month, not just the people building one home. And so the one home people doing their own thing, they're still there and they're still coming in and taking samples each week. But we're really seeing a lot more interest from the commercial building space for how can they, particularly around carbon, how can they bring hemp into any of their products? They don't know what it is. They just know hemp's good, hemp's low carbon, and we're trying to work together on what that product might look like for each of those people. And then there's other uses as well. Animal bedding and that's been really well utilized overseas. So we're kind of playing a little bit of catch up, and I'll put my hand up for that. But the demand in New Zealand is not unlimited for personal construction. But yeah, those commercial partners, we're certainly having a lot of conversations, seeing how we can make it a lot more mainstream.
Okay, well, that might lead into the next question here from an online viewer. How come we can't have insulation here in New Zealand?
Yeah, well, maybe I can answer that. So yeah, so look, we're well on the way for developing insulation products. That obviously it's a process. And one of the key things we want to do is make it fully sustainable. So we're actually looking at how do we hold it together, and how do we create the technical capabilities that we need to create. And so we have the equipment, we have some amount of investment that needs to go into finishing it off. But for us, yeah, it's really assembling those ingredients so we can stand up and talk that sustainable story. Also, with new building code regulations coming in on the 1st of December, there's quite a bit of understanding needs to happen. So one's around creating the product, then secondly it's around the technical specifications, getting it registered with brands. So none of this stuff happens quickly. So part of recently my trip was also around how do we partner with people globally who are doing this? How do we look again to complement other natural fibers that we've got? So yeah, so it's absolutely our next product off the camp, in our sort of portfolio, but it's going to take some time to bring through, and again, significant investment into that type of equipment.
Right, but it's a great use of your, if you're growing for getting the herd out for the construction side, and then you've got this Bass fibre, it's wonderful to be able to use that. And then I think, as you're doing more and more research, you'll go up that value chain to get more, these are low tech really uses, and then you get to the high tech. Absolutely. And that's sort of the next one was from the same chap, Yannick, could we make flooring boards with hemp? And of course, I'll throw in there, can we make jib with hemp?
I think certainly, there's heaps of products you can make. The key is, you can get overwhelmed. And so one of the things that I know we talk about 50,000 products. So one of the things that you come back with is you can do a whole lot of things, but where do you focus? It's that whole focus piece. Where do you want to play? How can you win? And when we bring it right back to needing to get a sustainable return per hectare, you can't just play everywhere. So for us, it's actually trying to identify those things where we know there's a gap, we know we have either capital or we have manufacturing equipment to take products to where they are now. And then it's like, okay, what's next? Because the next is several millions of dollars to do it on scale, to do it efficiently. And then you've got to compete still with the big boys out there in New Zealand that have alternative products that are still wanting to push too. So for us, it's a bit of a where do we play, how do we win sort of game. And so for us, yeah, building boards and those sort of things are there, but we can't do everything. And you know, you have to build that capability and that research and team and capital and distribution, and you know, how do you sell the product, how do you distribute the product? So there's lots of challenges.
Lots of moving parts, and I hear it, but you know, we've got this too many points, not enough penetration in a lot of cases, and that's an example of that. But I think the resilient supply chains, and is there any, again, if we could find that champion in government, I mean, you know, leveraging government procurement and sort of putting the pressure on them to say, okay, well, you're talking about sustainability, but is your money still going for the lowest cost and giving us a subpar product? So it's things like that possibly the conversations could happen as well at various levels.
I'm sure Peter could testify the wool industry's been bashing that door for decades. Relying on government to drive your demand, I don't think it's a good model. We've got to tell our story better and really get the consumer to bring it, because, right, Peter, hasn't been successful, that one.
Again, you know, telling the story better and letting the quality of that product go through and shine in those markets. But I think resilient supply chains, people have an appetite now. You know, Brad talked about that perfect storm. You know, the environment wants it, the consumer wants it. The government's even thinking about export potential and their commitments under greenhouse gas emissions and that sort of thing. So possibly they want it too. But you're right. I mean, the business plan's not going to work relying on the government, and it's only going to work relying on meeting a market demand at a price that the market will relatively pay. And there's possibly a premium in there at the moment being all those sustainable things, but ultimately it's still got to have economies of scale, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Right, so some massive opportunities there for New Zealand, all sorts of people throughout that value chain, those gaps. Come and see Craig and Ryan after the meeting if you're interested in the fibre. And if you're at seed and food, Midlands, Wayne's here. So Midlands, Hemp NZ and the Brothers Green are all represented here. So we've got a pretty wide cross-section of the existing companies in the industry. But where's it going to go next? That's this exciting part.
And I think that just some, through the Horati Hemp sector, some of the dairy farmers that are planting hemp, I know they've got children, their children's teachers were interested, they wanted some hemp seed. So I gifted them some because they wanted to educate them. Maybe that's a good, we can't continue going forward the way we've been, because we are at a dire place in our environmental status that we have to change. There is serious change that needs to go forward, and we've got to start young, right? We've got to,
for sure.
And maybe that's where this education needs to go into, as the young people,
Well,
into the schooling, and maybe that's how we get government to support. Is that, you know, I'm just throwing it out there that maybe it's the young people that we infuse that into their education.
For sure, it speaks to the same thing as I was saying about the R&D community. You know, the more they work in the space, the more they're going to need it. Those graduates coming out of university will become industry leaders and industry people in the future. Get them really young, you're onto it. But just beware though.
I know this.
Industrial hemp seeds are Class C drugs, so that, you know, you shouldn't be giving that away without a license.
Madness, right?
But it's a real opportunity. I mean, if these people, if our population was healthy and living in healthy homes, eating healthy food, that's got to relieve the pressure on the health system for us, you know, just like that, you know. So there's a lot of cause and effect going on here. So we're hoping that the hemp industry can be a catalyst to really bring those conversations up. Well, and I think if we can get those marketing...
McDonald's should be illegal, not hemp seeds.
Well...
absurd, you know, really, come on.
Yeah, not my monkey, but yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, there's been interesting going down from the country. It was up in Whangarei, the climate was the real big one from the audience. They were just really interested in those sort of questions there. So people have many, many different values and virtues, but it's interesting how aligned a lot of them can be with an established hemp industry or an establishing hemp industry. So if we can tap into that with that marketing, then we'll be awake. But it's, and that will happen. I mean, it's these sort of events, these sort of conversations. I mean, Brad, when you're getting 150 people in Timaru, my hats off to you for that. And raising awareness like that, it's amazing. So, a bit more coordinated effort, and, we can really see some amazing things come out of this space.
Where's New Zealand?
There's craft people that make paper. I've dropped off a whole lot of step that some of the first product that you're throwing around, passed around. I used to take it up to the IHC kiddies up in Whangarei, and they made wonderful craft paper, for scrapbookers and things. But as far as possibly it might fit into that use, and these guys might be able to speak to it in a moment, but my observation would be if they turned around and said, love the idea, your fibre is so strong it would help us with our recycling, give us 5,000 tonnes a week starting tomorrow. So that's sort of that supply demand, Craig, is that? And paper, to be fair, there's lots of other value adds that you get before your paper. But again, it's one on the list, somebody's list.
We haven't really, but Sion, I think, and Brian can speak to it.
Yeah, there's been research around pulping hemp and making paper, but it's really to Brad's point, like, are you solving a new problem with hemp paper, right? Like people not having paper or not having durable enough paper, or like it's not a problem that's top of mind for the general public. So you'll get cool, passionate people that love hemp, that want to do their art on hemp paper, they're happy to pay more for it, but you're not solving a mainstream problem.
Toilet paper shortage.
Wet wipes is North America, it's a big thing. So LA, fine processed hemp fibre, like that white bag. Wet wipes is one of their biggest uptakes, and wet wipes obviously not by the nature of being wet wipes. These machines isn't flushable, it's not biodegradable. It wouldn't be a wet wipe, right? So North America, that's kind of one of their avenues for fibre. But we're taking more of an apparel interiors approach, because that's when New Zealand's already strong as an industry. We don't have a single machine in the country that can make a product like that. So unless you're coming in with millions to start, we've focused the fibre strategy somewhere else. But yeah, you're right, toilet paper, sanitary and wet wipes is something that other countries are looking at.
What's your opinions on this new pine pollen pricing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good marketing angle for the industry to plug some of the gaps they're creating in their own marketing. It's, I think, like all that sort of stuff is, and we'll find like even pine extract in itself, all the essential oils and stuff, that flavonoids, terpenes, all these different things. I think now people start to tap into and understand how they work and how to apply them. But again, it's like, what problem is that solving for people? Like, it's a protein product, it's a micronutrient content, or it's not as easy as I think sound really good, but getting people to buy it is a completely different story.
Okay, I've got another couple of questions from the online community. What are the biggest export markets that the industry is looking at? I suppose food and fibre.
Well, I think if we get it right, this could be, you think about a private sector, and something we challenge all the time, like a farming sector, we actually have to export, right? I think if we get it right and we can create products in New Zealand, this could be a primary sector producing for New Zealand.
Yes.
And it could be massive. So if you think about, all of our other main exportable food fibre products, they're shipped to consumers. So we think there's a massive opportunity in New Zealand to have a large-scale primary production actually filled in New Zealand.
And moving up that value chain, so we're not a commodity, we're selling the value add.
Foods.
That's it. And these health products that have got global, a niche market in San Francisco that are already aware of all these qualities of hemp, just snap it up. The next one, also from our online, Is there a plan to survey the industry businesses who would benefit the most from investing in the infrastructure? Yes, we will be looking at sort of ways to try and do those surveys and engage with the industry. So yeah, keep an eye on this space. If we can move forward some initiatives that we're working on at the moment, we'll be able to update you on how that might look. But that's all the questions. There were some questions about some sound quality earlier in the piece, but we've overcome that. So is there any other questions from the audience before I let these three lovely gentlemen go? One more.
Yeah, one more last one. The Hemp Builders Association of New Zealand, they're working on bind up. Does anyone know any progress with that at all?
So the Hemp Building Association of New Zealand.
New Zealand bind up.
Yep, there's a few people working. There's a guy, Doug Sturrock, who presented at the Whangarei meeting, working on binder. And there's the East Coast Hemp organisation that has been working in that space for a wee while. And yeah, quite a few people are interested in that building space. You've got some really established builders in Queenstown building with the product, and they'll be customers of you guys. And you've got Antoine in Golden Bay has just received some Callahan funding to look at ways of using it in other building methods. And also in New Plymouth, the branching out people at Venture Taranaki had a project that they awarded the prize to panellees who are looking at I think it's a NIPS panel involving industrial hemp as well. So hopefully all those people will be in touch with Craig and Ryan in due course. But there's some amazing, meeting some of these people around the universities, it's some really good stuff's happening, and they're all open to you guys, from a fibre genetic point of view. Massey University's done fibre work for the last 18 years. They've got the primary growth unit all ready to go. And as I say, the Crown Research Institutes are understanding that they need to play to their strengths. So, by collaborating, by letting people know what others are doing in a pre-competitive way, without impinging on intellectual property and confidentiality and those sort of things, we do have some opportunities. And from my opinion, it's a brand new industry in 21st century Aotearoa New Zealand. Why wouldn't we give it a go? It's something that could really help us all. But if there's I'm going to, because that takes us bang on time to 10 o'clock. So you guys done wonderfully well, and I hope you have enjoyed. A big round of applause for Webtools and the beers they put on. And thank you to our speakers once again for giving up their evening to come along and share the information about the hemp industry with all of you. And I hope this is helping you to stimulate that market demand and be part of the industry. And we look forward to keeping in touch. So thank you very much, everybody. Well done.